Is it your view that Ukraine can win without the air power that it continues to ask for?
Well, that's what we're going to spend the next, I guess, year probably plus seeing, Fred. I am unfortunately not a military analyst, but what I think the pattern, though, that we've seen over this past year, the first year of the Ukrainian war, has been the West, very slowly, very cautiously, I think probably not to overwhelm Ukrainian logistics capabilities and that sort of thing, slowly ramping up the type of weaponry and the ammunition that goes with that over the past year. Will that also be the case for F-16s? I mean, you remember a couple of months ago, the administration was also saying, well, we're not going to send tanks. So that has shifted. Will this be another thing that shifts? Perhaps some of it will depend on what happens on the ground this year during the war. I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, because Biden did say they don't need it now. He did use the word not now. All right, so have a listen to what the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said yesterday in his United Nations address.
In this war, there is an aggressor and there is a victim. Russia fights for conquest. Ukraine fights for its freedom. If Russia stops fighting and leaves Ukraine, the war ends. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine ends. The fact remains, one man, Vladimir Putin, started this war. One man can end it.
So, Steve, do you see the potential scenario that Putin ends it perhaps after running out of resources or soldiers?
Well, first, I have to agree with the Secretary's very clear formulation on that. I mean, really, I think most commonsensical, straight-thinking people in the world, if you look at it, say, okay, nations are built with this idea of sovereignty. Other people don't get to come in and invade you, and that's precisely what Russia did unprovoked into Ukraine. So that basis for all of this is certainly true. As to whether or not Putin will run out of something, willpower, ammunition, men that it wants to send into the meat grinder, I would be surprised if Putin found a way just to say, okay, no, this is a big mistake, or I've gone too far, or we don't have enough resources. This is one of the significant problems with this, is that where does Putin go from here? I mean, if he somehow gives up and surrenders, that's going to have negative implications for him back in Russia. But if he doesn't win, that will too. And it looks like he's not going to win, certainly not in the short to midterm. So I'm glad I'm not in Vladimir Putin's position right now, because he doesn't have a whole lot of space to work with.
Is this perhaps an effort of buying time then for Putin that, China, President Xi Jinping is planning a visit to Moscow. China, has proposed a peace plan for Ukraine, and now Zelensky says, wait a minute, there needs to be a summit, involving Ukraine and China. Who perhaps might have the greatest leverage over China here?
The Chinese position is really interesting and very complicated. So I think the Chinese have they've stated they have very long-term goals. They want to be, the primary superpower economically, militarily, in the next 50 years in the future. But by the same token, they share a certain ideology with Russia, and that is democracies worldwide are a threat to them, because China is an authoritarian nation. So how is China going to play some sort of neutral, moderating position in this when it's pretty clear they're coming down on Russia's side? So clearly that helps Russia, but China has already been warned by the United States and by the West, you shouldn't be giving them weapons, or that's going to be a bad thing. So China's walking a really, really fine tightrope. Certainly it's true that China needs Russia much less than Russia needs China at this point.
And as you mentioned, economics is the real incentive for China. So perhaps China could be looking at a sort of partnering with Ukraine, because, look, so much of the country has been decimated. China might be able to, offer assistance or see it as an opportunity to help rebuild that country. So economically, it gains.
Yeah, and that's kind of the role that China has been playing, for the past 20 years. It's trying to use its growing economic influence to, reach out to nations that are not in as good a situation economically and try to help them. It can benefit from a relationship with Ukraine. But I think more importantly, Fred, geopolitically, China, if it's going to have the future it wants to have, has to have really good economic relations with the West, with the EU, with the United States and other developed countries. A relationship with Russia at this point, those are mutually exclusive. You can't have both of those things. And so I think if I'm Russia, I'm thinking over the long term, I think the Chinese are probably not necessarily going to be on our side if we stay on the current course and continue the war in Ukraine.